friends, thank you so much for joining me today. Today's topic is the brand new palette from NATASHA DENONA called I Need a Nude. If that kind of name sounds familiar, there have been I Need a Nude lipsticks and lip liners and stuff, and they've expanded and they're doing an eyeshadow palette. So in this video, I'm going to give you my take on this palette. I'm going to give you some comparisons to the palettes that are already in NATASHA DENONA's line that might be a little similar. Also, some drugstore, I won't call them dupes, but maybe some possibilities that could give you a similar look. I'll give you a little how-to on the look that I did today, and yeah, just talk it all over. So for starters, I received this palette in PR. It contains, let's see, 5, 10, 15 colors. It has a beautiful mirror. It's the really nice construction that you expect out of the NATASHA DENONA palettes. You can also poke shades out if you want to and rearrange them, but this does retail for $69. So when I see a palette like this come out, even if I did receive it in PR, I really want to stop and think, like, would I spend my own money on this? So we're going to kind of establish that in this video. But as you can see, we have a mix of matte and shimmer. NATASHA DENONA with her palettes, it's really rare to see just that classic gradient going across where it's the lightest shade over here to the darkest shade. There's always kind of the sprinkled effect, but our mattes are here and here. We have a super dark matte and these mattes right here, okay? So you're seeing a couple of kind of like rosy options. One's a little more peachy, one's more like a dusty rose. We do have this matte cream, several matte kind of like medium taupey colors, very cool, and then this super dark brown that, as you'll see in the demo, almost comes off like a soft black. It's so cool. But they do describe this palette as a must-have cool tone palette. We have varying levels of shimmer in here as well. Emphasis on taupe, I feel. So this one up here called Travertine, we're seeing like just a really soft shimmer. I think it's nice to see those levels in the palette, different textures. Whisper is another one where it's kind of that classic shimmery texture. And then Ella and Filigree, both of those have, I don't love to use the word chunky, but when you look at them, they kind of have that appearance like, oh, is this going to be like a really heavily metallic type of color? And that's Ella on my pointer finger and Filigree on my pinky. You can see they both have a ton of shimmer. Filigree in particular has a lot of softness, and I see fallout from that shade. Muse right in here is kind of a similar texture to those. It's super metallic. And then Delilah, Sheen, and Mia all have this kind of thin quality to them. When you swatch them with your finger, you're like, wow, that seems like a really soft shade, but they can almost take on a wet look. But they just don't have the thickness of feel of those other shimmers that I first mentioned. Really a nice variety of textures. In using this palette, really the only shade that gave me, I guess, some trouble has been Filigree. You just have to watch it on the fallout. I've used it in more of a blending capacity, like getting a very light amount on my brush. I did that with today's look, and I kind of blended it on the outer edge. That worked better for me than trying to pack that all over the lid, like pick up a decent amount on your brush and pack. Then I start seeing fallout out of that. So just something to know. Not a huge issue because I could dust it away on the day that I did that. But yeah, we're talking cool tones here. We have a little bit of a rosy direction with those mid-tones where you could use those as kind of a transition, you know, help blend it back into your skin tone. An issue for me is that we have one really dark shade. This shade at a glance looks dark, and I'm not saying you can't throw some of that in the crease or around the crease as I did today, but as far as rich dark color, it's all coming back to that one shade in this palette called Silhouette. Personally, I'd like to see a little more variety than that. That's just my personal preference though. If you're looking to day in and day out do kind of a taupey, cool eye look, and you really like shimmer opportunities, because there's a lot of that in here, this might be a good palette for you. If you've been hoping for the cool tones, you also like those little couple of rosy pops that come with it too. But yeah, a couple of the biggest pros of NATASHA DENONA palettes are the pigment and the staying power for me. Like, regardless of how the color selection or the shade variety shakes out in a palette, I know that when I use these, I'm gonna have good pigmentation, and those shadows are really gonna adhere to my eyes, and I'm gonna end my day with the same kind of look that I started with. Those are a couple of qualities that I think tend to be non-stop advantages for me as far as NATASHA DENONA palettes are concerned. Yes, you're paying a little more money, but you are getting that really good quality, ease of use, I think, generally speaking, and good staying power. But as far as this palette goes in particular, do you need it? Even if you think about some of the other palettes that NATASHA DENONA has made, it's not wildly different from those. Like, the first one that came to my mind was the Glam Glam palette, and this is labeled as one of the best sellers on Natasha Denona's website. And look, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of similarity here. I would say where this one went a little more brownish, this one has those mid-tone pinks going on, but you still have a lot of coolness here, you know, and I think you actually have some more deeper options to play with. You got these mid-tones here. There's a little splash of gold in this palette that this one doesn't have. A couple of these shimmers up top almost look like they have a splash of rose gold in them. So ultimately this one might be a little bit cooler, but I still think you could get loads of cool looks out of this one because we still have some taupes floating around there that can give you a very similar look to this, and that really deep dark shade that's like a, you know, a soft black in the Glam palette. I do see a lot of similarities here, although I would have to say this one maybe could give you more of that icy look, and also you got those rosy mid-tones. Another one that this causes me to think about is the one called My Dream palette, and this is probably my favorite Natasha Denona palette because this I really feel is one of her best balanced palettes. Look at all the depth in here. Like, we have rich plums, we have dark browns, we have burgundy, got warm mid-tones, a variety of shimmers. Like, I just felt like for 15 shades there was a lot packed in here and a lot that it could pull off in an overall color scheme that really appeals to me personally. And when you look at it next to this, I'm not saying there's a ton of similarities, but I do feel like I could pull off maybe some similar looks here. But I just thought you might be interested to see these side by side, considering this has probably been my most talked about Natasha Denona palette, just out of curiosity to see them together. Here again, more dark options and overall a lot more warmth, some rosiness, like I kind of see some dusty rose quality, peachy quality in that one, and here it's very cool with just those couple of rosy pops. For me, it's kind of like, well, I enjoy the kind of look this can turn out because I'm a neutral eyeshadow fan. I like those kinds of vibes. I can enjoy anywhere from a cool to a warm neutral eye, but which is my favorite? This still like completely reigns supreme. I think there are many more unique and special things happening in this palette compared to this one. Another one that's on the market but not Natasha Denona that this makes me think of is the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes. So you look at this and I really see some similarities here. I think what Mario gives you are a couple more brownish shades. Look here and here, this whole row really goes a bit more brown tone, but those taupey shimmers and those shimmers that have almost a wet look quality to them, plus a little bit of a rosy option there. I think you can get some very similar looks, although while this has more dark shades, this has the darkest shade, okay, compared to anything in Mario. That shade will take you darker than any of this. So just wanted to point that out in case you already own this and you were wondering how similar are they. They're pretty similar. And in terms of drugstore palettes that remind me of the I Need a Nude, definitely I would say the closest thing that I have would be the ColourPop Going Coconuts palette. Here I'm seeing options in terms of midtones. They've got that taupe thing going on here in terms of a taupey shimmer. We have that really highly shimmery shade in the center. We have Dusty Rose here as well to play with, and that really deep, dark, like cool brown. And if you look at Going Coconuts up beside I Need a Nude, I think you will see obviously fewer options all around because this is a 9-shade palette and this is a 15, but my goodness, could you get some similar looks if you already have this, for sure. I think that's a really close alternative. Another one that I thought about that was just in my collection, the Milani Gilded Mini in the shade Call Me Old Fashioned. This one, if you're looking for a smaller palette that does have an overall cool vibe to it, you know, we've got black, we've got dark brown, we have taupe, something a little more coppery in this one, and then a couple finishes of a light shade here too. So again, we're not calling these dupes. Obviously this is not duping this entire palette, but you look at it and you think, I could see going in the same direction with some looks that might be done with that. And just a couple other things I would throw out there. Stone Cold Fox and Bare Necessities from ColourPop. If you own these, check out your Bare Necessities palette and I think you'll see like, okay, I could definitely pluck the look that's going on here from this. I'm not saying the entire vibe of the palette looks like this, but I'm saying I could get deep, dark, cool brown out of this. I could get a little bit of rosy accent. I could get some taupe. There's a little crossover within that palette, and also Stone Cold Fox probably even more so with the overall color scheme. Again, we have a rosy row in here for accents, but we have cool deep shades. We've got more than a few taupes in here, so I just thought that might be something to consider as well. Personally, if I were looking into buying this palette, I think it's helpful to just bring other things into the conversation, because a lot of people might own at least one of the other palettes I've talked about, and then you can think, do I really need that, what is it, $69 palette? Also guys, I need a coffee break. Look at my new mug. I got this from Hobby Lobby. I think it's so precious, my little owl. But I'm gonna wrap this up in a minute, but first I think another valuable part of any review is seeing the palette actually in action. So here's a little how-to on the look I did today. I'm gonna get into a little demo with the palette, but as far as what's already on my face today, I'm wearing NYX Can't Stop Won't Stop foundation and concealer. My blush is Laura Geller Pink Buttercream, and I also use Laura Geller Baked Bronze and Brighten as my bronzer contour. Milani eyeshadow primer is already on, and today I'm gonna use a little bit of this shade called Stone right here in the upper left with my Profusion crease brush. And I like how a couple of these colors just kind of give the effect of a natural shadow. So I feel like that's kind of a nice starting point for the crease, although you can also use those couple of dusty rose shades for starters as well. There's a nice little handful of midtones. Last night I had one of the kittens sleeping on me for like half the night, like I was laying on my stomach and she was laying on my back. For about half the night. I guess it's kind of that weighted blanket effect, just with a cat. So I am building this shade up a little bit. Like it's, as you can see, it's pretty soft. It's not really a struggle to build up. I'm just probably going back and like reapplying one more coat of it on top of what I first put on. Guys, the heat is just crazy this week. It really feels like you're walking out into an oven. And you look at the forecast and it's like no rain in sight, just hot. Okay, so I've blended Stone all over my crease area and a little bit above. And then I'm gonna take some of this shade called Mesh right here. You can see if you compare it to Stone, it looks a little bit lighter. So I'm gonna go into that. I don't know if I pointed to the right one. It's that one right there. I'm gonna get a little bit of that on and kind of go maybe slightly above Stone now. I feel like I've been so drawn to the rosy shades the first several times I've used this palette that I'm trying to like use some of the other midtones today. That's really pretty. Take up the space and get a nice, just soft amount of color up there. Then I think I'm going to take some of Silhouette right here. This is our matte, really dark brown. I just want to show you the pigment on that and kind of let you see how dark you can take the look. This is the one really dark shade in the palette. So I'm just patting that on my outer corner. Want to leave quite a bit of space on the lid to do some other things, but we'll get that outer corner, okay? There we go. A really dark brown I think is great to have in a palette. And this is such a cool dark brown. As it shears out on the eyes, it kind of looks like a soft black, really. So I'm taking that with my flat brush and patting it on my lid and really trying to reach my crease as well. Small pointed brush from Profusion. I'm going to grab a little bit more of that shade and then just really ensure that I've got it in my crease. And here I can work it a little bit higher if I want to. And I find that this dark shade does blend nicely with any midtones you've already worked with in your crease. They all play well together, the mattes. And if you need to blend over that again with your original crease brush, go for it. I haven't added any product here. Just blending. Another thing I noticed I could do with this palette is look at some of the deeper toned shimmers and use those also in a blending type mode. Like take a little bit of filigree here. You got to be careful with this one because this can produce some fallout. But I actually notice more of that if I'm trying to pack it on. I get more fallout. Don't know if any of that was in focus, but I'm kind of like blending the edge of the crease with a little bit of that shimmer. And I think it looks pretty. Next, I'm going to try a little bit of this shade called Ella up here. It seems really similar to filigree, but it is like maybe a bit more bronzy and just a little softer. Pick some of that up, and I'm going to take this over like the center part of my lid. This color does have like some micro fine, really small silvery sparkle, and I kind of can see that coming through on my lid a bit. And yeah, it's definitely lighter than Filigree. This one's called Ella. Then I'm gonna go for this really light, bright shimmer down here, and it looks super shiny, and it has kind of a thinner feel to the touch. That one's called Mia, and I'm dabbing that on like my inner corner, bringing it in to meet what I just did. It's really brightening. It just has that micro fine, like really small shimmer particles in here. And you might notice I took that from the inner corner out, and doing it that way, like I do want a lot of shine and brightness around that inner corner where you first put your brush, the most product goes. So I'm going to get a lot of intensity there and then just kind of let it ease in and overlap the rest. Okay, so there's what we're looking at for the top of the eye. I wanted to go very, very blended, using the darkness but making it seem very seamless, you know? And I'm gonna take a little bit of this shade called Tender right here, and I'm gonna just use some Tender on my lower lash line. Really nice soft shade, kind of hard to put your finger on color, you know, like you can tell something's there, something has further defined the eye, but it's not super dark at all. Okay, and that is the eyeshadow look. Next I'm going to do a little bit of liner and lashes, and I'll show you how it turned out. Alright guys, so here's my finished look. I put on liquid liner, and I also popped on my Kiss My Lash But Better style false lashes. The specific style is called So Real. They're very not real. They're kind of dramatic, but I really like them. I just love the shape and the length that they give. And then on my lips, I am wearing this lipstick from Revlon. It's called Secret Club. It's a fairly bold medium pink, but then over the top of that, because I didn't really want them to take over the look, I used this Kosas Wet Lip Oil in the shade Unbuttoned. So that kind of toned it down a little bit and gave some nice shine. Bottom line here, gang, I feel like the variety of looks coming from this palette is not especially high. I think people get palettes for different reasons. There are some people who could say, looking at this, that is my everyday, like, the look I want to do day after day after day. I don't need it to vary greatly from one day to the next. I'm not saying you couldn't get a few different looks out of this one, but you're a little bit confined when this is your one dark shade. A lot of looks come back to that, and then your mid-tones can either go a little more rosy or a little more taupe. That splash of shimmer on the lid, if that feels like a really pleasing shadow setup for you every day, great. But some people get palettes, and I think I'm one of these people. I look at it and I say, how many different ways can that palette go for me? And the My Dream palette from Natasha Denona, that one can go a lot of different ways for me. There's some experimentation to be had with that. There are quite a few different looks I could crank out here, and I see it in what I've already done with this palette. The differences in the looks you do are much more subtle, okay? It could be, well, I used a slightly less shimmery taupe on my lid on this day, and then on this day I went harder with it because I used, you know, that color over there. The subtle differences, sometimes some people can appreciate that, some people can't. I very much have liked the looks that I've turned out, but in terms of a $69 investment, would I have bought this myself if I hadn't been sent it in PR? I'm gonna say I probably wouldn't have, or I would have waited on it. I feel like between the Glam palette, the My Dream palette, Makeup by Mario palette, which I already had, Ethereal Eyes, and then all the other lower cost options that I showed, I'm loaded with the ability to create this kind of look. Added advantages, again, that Natasha Denona gives, though, are good staying power and ease of application, like just a pleasant experience because the pigment is so there. A little bit of fallout with this palette. There's a little pesky shade in there, but she still works. So I'd say I like this palette, but I don't love this palette. I don't find it to be an absolute necessity, but I can still enjoy it. I hope that sums up my review well enough here, but you got options, okay? You got other options. If you have Going Coconuts and this kind of look appeals to you, bust out your Going Coconuts palette and fall in love with it again, because this is pricey. Holiday makeup, dare I say holiday makeup, is coming right around the corner. There may be a lot of other things you want to spend your money on. This doesn't feel like an essential to me. So that's my take, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this review was informative for you, and I will see you again very soon. I love you. Bye.